Okay, we realized we didn't really take much video while we were installing the furring strips down kind of on the bottom half of the bus, but basically we did it the same as we did the ceiling. It just was a lot easier because we didn't have to curve anything. So we just cut the pieces, leaving a little gap at the bottom to allow us to have a wire run along the bottom. Up on the ceiling, we kind of did the same thing, where we have a gap here to allow us to run wires, as well as the places, I think I already showed you this, kind of in between where we know we have places where wires need to go for lights. We left little gaps, but kind of along the same lines. We did the same thing here to have wire runs, and down here at the very bottom we'll have wire runs. And here actually you can sort of see where we have the Roxol already in place, how by making these extra wide, these are 6 inches wide, it gives us sort of a nice little pocket to tuck the Roxol in and hold it in place. So that'll be great. And we still have to figure out kind of what we're doing in these center sections around the windows, in terms of how we're gonna do the furring strips and secure everything in there. So we're still kind of working on that part of it. But for the most part, all of the lower parts are done. We did have to leave some places open. So like behind the kitchen, we'll turn around and come over here. This is where our kitchen cabinets are gonna go. So we did not put any furring strips here because we're actually just gonna put a piece of 3/4 ply along the back, so that we can have something big and solid to mount our kitchen cabinets to. Same thing like with the closet area over here. It's kind of a mess, but we didn't put any furring strips in here because there's just going to be like a solid wall back here to back our closet. Same thing sort of for like behind the shower and where the pantry and fridge are gonna go. Okay, so last we left you, we said we didn't really know what we were doing with this middle section here next to the windows. So this interior metal skin still had, it was like the last remnants of the original fiberglass insulation from the bus that we hadn't removed yet. Obviously we had already taken out everything on the ceiling, everything on the lower part of the walls, but there was still pieces that were shoved, that were tucked back in behind this interior skin that we aren't taking down. And it's funny, we kind of joked that every time we walked by and you can see through these holes, you could like see that old insulation. We could see it and it was like it was mocking us. It was just gross and it just looked gross in there and just made me mad like every time we walked by it. But what we just weren't sure about was if this skin was structural, like could we cut into it? We aren't removing it, but what could we do to get that insulation out of there? And so we posted on Facebook and a few of our bus groups and just asked, like, is it okay if we cut into this to remove that insulation? And several people responded. Such an awesome community. We just love the bus community. But they said, yes, it should be okay. You can cut into it. And so that's what we did. What we kind of in each little section, we just cut a rectangle kind of big enough to get a hand in there, a few fingers in there, and pull it out. And we'll show you some pictures here. We're so glad we pulled that out. I mean, we remembered how gross and disgusting it was when we pulled it out of the rest of the bus, but that's been a while since we've done that, and just reminded me why we did all that in the first place, because that insulation was black, probably moldy. I don't know, we wore respirators and glasses and gloves and all of that and pulled it out of there. So glad it's like the last of it is out of the bus. And then basically we just stuffed our Roxol up in there and shoved it all the way up in and all down. So now that's all refilled with insulation in all the different spots around all the windows like this. We're so glad that part is done. But we haven't done this part yet because we needed to run a few wires down in this track before you did it. So you can kind of see them peeking through here. And we'll have a different video with lighting as we do the wiring for the lighting, but a couple of these are gonna run down here and come to our welcome light that comes out down here. And one of them is a network cable that is gonna go down to some switches that are gonna go down here. So we had to get those wires run in this kind of track space, and then we'll stuff this with insulation and we'll call this good, and then we'll put some furring strips up here, and then we should be all set. So we are getting ready to start making some trim work for these windows in the back of the bus. We removed the old stuff that was there, and so there's one with it removed, and what we've done is just for now we've put a piece of plywood in that fits, and then Juan's gonna draw from the outside like a template. So I'm gonna go around the outside and show you that. Okay, we got all of the windows trimmed out, and it was really tedious work, a lot of making templates and taking the frames off and putting them back on, and you know, we wanted it to be as close to exact as we could, because we know that once our top walls are on, you're still going to sort of be able to see the lip of this, you know, kind of from the side, and we didn't want to have, you know, breaks in it or have it, you know, not match up and then there's a gap. So we really took our time and made sure we got it as close to even all the way around as we possibly could, so that when we're finished it looks nice and it's, you know, all clean lines everywhere. So on these ones with the aluminum frames, we were able to just take the frames off, use that as a starting point for a template, but there was a lot of sanding and just shaving it just ever so much and adjusting and going back and forth. But you know, we're pretty happy with how it turned out. I did want to just show one kind of thing that we did is back here. So on the metal back behind this, there are these bolt holes for these big, huge bolts, and there's nuts welded on the back of these. This is where, when this was a passenger bus, where like the overhead storage bins were like mounted into the walls. And so there are these, you know, big bolt holes and welded on nuts all the way down the bus. And so wherever we could, we actually kept, you know, we kept access to those bolt holes, so that we can use those as a mounting point for ourselves for our upper cabinets, or, you know, for anything heavy that we might want to hang. We just wanted to give ourselves the option to use those in the future. So you know, we had to like mark where all of those were and get those holes exactly right. And then we just screwed all of this in. So all the windows are done. Around the rubber ones, obviously we couldn't take off, you know, the aluminum, but what we did was we sort of used these ones as a reference and just trimmed them to fit. The windows aren't all the same. It would have been nice to just make one template and say, oh yeah, we could just use that for all of them, but of course that's just not how any of this works. So really, like, each side of the window had to be kind of custom made. In the back, I can show you what we did back here real quick. So for these windows in the back that are RV windows, the framework that was on there from the previous owner was not good. I'll just put it that way. So we ripped all that out, and then this was basically a huge pain because, well, a couple things. Number one, the framework that was in here from the original owner around these windows was not square, like not even close. Like the height on this side to the height on this side of the framework that he put around it was off by like probably ½ inch, and then same thing, kind of like top to bottom, it was off. So nothing was square to start out with. Also, I think we talked about this before, the walls somewhat camber in, and so like the thickness of it up here at the top is different than the thickness at the bottom. So what we did was we started with a 3/4 inch piece of plywood, made like a big framework around the window, and then we had to then take some 1/4 inch pieces and fill in, and then we would have to like shave it down at the top so that it angled in, and then finally when that was all done, we just put this framework all the way around. So again, when we put our final walls on here, this will all be covered. We'll use like a wood, it's called edge banding, I think, like a veneer edge banding to go around all of this, but we needed it to be, you know, as perfectly smooth and flat all the way around the window as possible, so that when we put that on, it looks good. The other kind of weird thing that we discovered after 2.5 years of owning this bus, which we never knew, is these aren't the same windows. The driver's side window is 1 inch wider than the passenger side window. They're the same height, but this one's like 28 inches wide and that one's 29 inches wide. And, you know, we had no idea. We had never measured the windows before. We hadn't had reason to, and we thought they were the same window. So trimming out these windows, it was just really tedious work, but we're really happy with how they turned out. So now that finally we feel like the ceiling furring strips and the wall furring strips and around the windows, and that is all done, we're finally ready to kind of check that off the list. And the next step is going to be running wiring for all of our overhead lighting, which is what all the little blue tape marks are. It's where overhead lights are going to be. So we're going to get all the wires run for that. When that's done, we can finish insulating the ceiling and then think about what the next step is. So we will, we're going to wrap this up and get started on wiring.